Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares, and I've got another time-lapse for this week. Actually, this one's going to be two time-lapses back-to-back. I've been working on a new color tutorial, and I've already got some examples to use from my existing work, but I wanted to create a couple more pieces to use for that video, just some things I can try some different color palettes on. So what I'm working on here will be two small building designs, kind of in a top-down style. I thought it would be useful to try something a little different than I normally make, just to have some variety. And I was looking through all my work, and I came to the realization that I've actually never made any top-down pixel art pieces. I was kind of surprised by that, actually. Like, the top-down look is one of those quintessential cornerstones of the pixel art aesthetic, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to practice that style a little bit. By the way, I've got like files kind of scattered across hard drives and stuff, so one of the most complete collections of my work is actually just my Instagram page, and honestly it's usually the place that I go to look up my own pieces if I need to reference something, such as whether or not I've actually ever made any top-down pixel art, for example. Everything I make on this channel ends up over there too, and sometimes I actually post additional stuff that isn't from a video or anything like that. So if you want to check out more of my work or just dig through the archives, that's probably the best place to go. Anyway, for these top-down pieces, I'm working with a couple simple parameters here. The canvas size of my artwork area is 100 by 100 pixels, which I chose just a bit arbitrarily just to have a small space to work within. I thought it might be kind of fun to take a really small canvas like that and just see if I could make some nice looking detailed buildings. And the second parameter here is that I'm only using 4 colors, these 4 grayscale tones for now, which I eventually assign color to later. As I mentioned, these are intended for use in my color tutorial, and that's going to be all about color pairings within a really restricted palette. So what I've got for now are just these 4 grayscale tones that are evenly spaced at brightness levels of 20, 40, 60, and 80, just kind of providing a balanced level of contrast. So between that small canvas size and the limited color count, it was just a bit of an experiment to see what kind of style I could come up with. For my initial construction here, I'm using the darkest shade to create outlines for everything, and then filling in the rest with the lighter shades. In general, the front face of any object or building is one shade darker than the top face. Obviously, with only 4 shades to work with, this doesn't give many pairings, but that's why the outline can help break it up a little bit to provide some clarity. The other thing I tried here was just eliminating the bottom edge of that outline. I think it helped reinforce the top-down perspective a little bit more by not having the visual weight of the outline in that spot. With something like this, when you jump into a brand new piece, it's useful to look at those parameters that you put in place, if any, and think about how they might be used to create a coherent style. For example, I might decide that any object with some kind of dimension to it should have a full black border around it, including separation between the top face and the front face, or that maybe the border should just be around the outside edge only and maybe get lighter towards the top of the object. I like to keep track of these small stylistic decisions because they create a kind of logic for how you approach your artwork, and throughout the course of making an entire piece, those decisions add up to generate the overall drawing style itself. Sometimes you'll find that the logic that you put in place doesn't always work though. Like, what do you do when the border color for one of the objects is the same color as the background that it's on? I think I faced that dilemma a few times throughout this drawing and decided to either make the border one step darker or just to eliminate certain parts of it. Again, it's about recognizing those choices under different contexts so you can attempt to apply them consistently across the entire piece. It's interesting to think about all the possibilities when it comes to style, actually. Like, if you compare environments of classic top-down RPGs such as Chrono Trigger and Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, there's 2 different stylistic approaches that have been taken, and they kind of emphasize different artistic aspects. For the same resolution, Chrono Trigger has more of a highly detailed and textured approach, using a wide range of colors and shades. For me, it's really one of the gold standards for what a 16-bit era RPG looks like. On the other hand, Link to the Past appears as very cartoony, simplified, and vibrant. There are fewer shades of color used per object, and there's a strong use of dark outlines around many of the assets. These stylistic differences both require their own unique approach to constructing the environment, and the result is that it sets different tones for the appearance and experience within the game. So why am I rambling about this? Well, I just think it's fun to consider this stuff, and when you're creating and evolving a brand new piece, you have a lot of freedom to take it in any number of stylistic directions. For this one, I ended up with a really simple and almost flat kind of style, partially expected from the parameters I used, I guess, but there are a few nice details and perspectives in there. To color this one, I used the gradient map adjustment in Photoshop to find these pinkish kind of colors, almost like a rosy sort of Game Boy look. Again, this is a bit of a placeholder for now, because I'll be talking about color choices more in that upcoming video. So now that I had a bit of style and logic in place for how I might construct a top-down piece with these parameters, I decided to try a second piece and make a more obvious environment. With the first piece, I had just jumped straight into it, and it was more or less improvising the environment as I went on. For my second attempt though, I came up with a clear vision for like a small junkyard kind of shop, and actually sketched out what I thought it could look like from both a front view and a top view. This proved to be a nice approach for me, since I found it easier to think about the architecture just from one particular dimension, like either the front or the top. And then when I sat down to do the pixel work, it was pretty smooth to translate those layouts into the actual top-down look. And for this piece, I wanted to work a little bit more with textures and see how I could use my restricted parameters to achieve subtle differences like that. So making a junk shop was perfect because I figured the place could just be assembled from different kinds of pieces. Like the top is supposed to be sort of like a trailer section sitting on top of stone walls. And then there's like a small brick chimney and a small section with like an angled corrugated metal roof. I went through and tried to detail a lot of different parts on and around the building, just to give more context for the theme and have a lot of objects that reinforce that top-down perspective. I also added in a bordering wall just to give it a bit of enclosure of the junkyard, and I know it's a small thing, but it was kind of fun to figure out the corner sections and like the different sides of the wall, sort of like making like a miniature tile set in a sense. And with those walls in place, I got the idea to create almost like a muddy trail of footprints, just to help give like an additional lived-in feel, or sort of like an obvious trail kind of leading around this place, I guess. Throughout this though, I found that there's a fine balance to getting the correct angles for these objects. Like if you're looking at it from this superposition of a front face and a top face, you need to sacrifice the right amount from each of those to give it a believable perspective. Like if an object is tipped too low or too high, it kind of breaks the consistency across the rest of the piece. For me, that's one of those things that'll definitely take more practice to get consistent and comfortable with. Nevertheless, I finished out the yard with a few different objects, just trying things with different heights and different angles. If you want a nice bit of pixel art practice, I actually highly recommend making a junkyard because it forces you to come up with a bunch of different objects and learn how to draw them in whatever style you're attempting. And again, for the color, I overlaid a gradient map and then just shifted the hues around a little bit to find a sort of sepia or rusty kind of look that really suits this one for now. And just like that, we've got two brand new, simple top-down pieces. So that was a bit of a fun experiment, a bit of fun practice, and I hope you enjoyed watching the process. As I mentioned, I'll be back next week, likely with that video about color. Hopefully I'll see you then. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.